Today we have a look at something special. This is a very special edition Seiko Prospex Diver's watch. This release is essentially celebrating the 62 mass, the granddaddy of Seiko dive watches. Now I hear you thinking, wait a minute, didn't Seiko already celebrate the 62 mass a few times before? Well, yes, but who am I to complain? Now before we continue, all the essential details that you need to know about this watch in the next 60 seconds. The case size has a thickness of 14.1 mm, a diameter of 39.9 and a lug-to-lug of 47.9 mm. The watch is a Seiko Diver, so you get 200 meter water resistance, a screw case back, screw-down crown and a unidirectional rotating bezel. It is a Seiko indeed, proven by the fantastic Loom right here. Now the dial is a warm blue, which plays nicely with the baby blue seconds hand. The hands and the plied indices are wonderfully finished. The hands have a brushed finish on the top with polished sides. While this watch is part of the Prospex collection, the Prospex logo remains absent at 6 o'clock on the dial. The case is made from Seiko's proprietary ever-brilliant steel, which is harder wearing and supposed to rival oyster steel. No steel bracelet, but 2 silicone straps are included in the box. Beating inside is Seiko's workhorse SLA043. A standard accuracy for this movement is rated at +15 and -10 seconds a day. It has a 50-hour power reserve, and finally the watch features a date function and a stop second hand function. Now, let me perhaps begin by stating that this is essentially a very polished version of Seiko's equally awesome recent SPB release, which is a little bit more economically priced. Now, we've done a detailed video on that particular release on the channel as well, so certainly check that out if you like this type of Seiko Diver design. So this is really that watch, but then essentially on steroids. The finishing and components on this SLA is more than a few steps above the more affordable SPB release. The hands and indices are absolutely gorgeous. Where you think you see imperfections on the hands, they are actually polished so well that they are simply reflecting items in the distance here. This is a Seiko, yes, but finished to Grand Seiko standards if you ask me, while still very much retaining that Seiko DNA. It keeps its Seiko identity by keeping a tool-like rather than a luxurious or over-polished feel. And I mean that as a very big compliment. The case here has an all-over brushed finish, which gives it a matte appearance. I personally love this look on my divers watches and think it looks stellar on this one too. This ever-brilliant steel is a hint brighter than standard steel. The difference is quite noticeable when comparing side by side. Not only does it look different, it is also different in the sense that it is more resistant to, for example, corrosion, so it is harder wearing. Now, as per Seiko, this material is used extensively in components of marine structures and vessels to avoid corrosion in a chloride-rich environment, such as seawater. And so here we have it as well, used for the case. Now, another striking detail here is the domed crystal. As you see, it creates a slight distortion at the edge of the dial that, to my taste, looks fantastic. I can't stress enough how much I like the box-shaped crystal on this watch. Another detail here that I want to point out is the bezel. If you were to compare this to the Seiko SPB series, this bezel is considerably thinner and has a more refined and a retro look to it. That is much truer to the original 62 mass, if that is an important detail to you. But generally speaking, I do find this thinner bezel to wear a little bit more refined than the wider bezel on the SPB. The movement then is the 8L35, an automatic movement that is based on the Grand Seiko caliber 9S55. You could call this an undecorated Grand Seiko movement essentially. As such, it has also been assembled by hand at the Shizukuishi Watch Studio in Japan, and now the 8L caliber is famously a bit hit and miss in terms of accuracy. Now the one we have here was nicely humming along at plus and minus 5 seconds a day, give or take, but the standard accuracy for this movement is rated at plus 15 and minus 10 seconds a day. The 8L accuracy is a bit of a lottery, and it looks like we got a winner here. The reason for this apparent randomness is actually that Seiko does not regulate this movement to the same standard as Grand Seiko would. For that, one needs to bump up to, you guessed it, Grand Seiko. Now another lottery with Seiko is the alignment of the Loom Pip, so let's have a go here. Now, since we have had pretty great luck with the caliber on this watch, perhaps the same is true for the Loom Pip. Well, you can't have them all, I guess. Now the back then, very briefly, as it is a diver's watch, there is no see-through case back, so you cannot look at the undecorated movement, but instead you are greeted with a little dolphin right there, which is a wink to the original. Now on the wrist then. On the wrist, this wears like a dream. To me, this really is the perfect size for a diver like this. You might have heard earlier that the thickness is a pretty serious 14.1 millimeters. However, I must insist and stress that this includes the old school box-domed sapphire crystal, which I think adds close to 2 millimeters to the overall thickness here. I didn't quite measure it, but I eyeballed it, and I think, yeah, 2 millimeters is about right. So this watch is by no means a thick watch. Nicely proportioned, and overall this will fit a wide variety of wrists with ease. For reference, my wrist measures 16.5 centimeters more or less. Now, for more than a while now, it has become abundantly clear that the Swiss cannot ignore the quality and craftsmanship that has been put forward by Grand Seiko. This is, however, not that. This is much more than that. This is actually Seiko saying they will not be ignored either. From fit to finish, this leaves quite a few luxury watches in its price category in the dust.